Hey everyone, I'm Mark Grasse. This is Podcast Mark, where I bring on my friends, colleagues, and other professionals I've worked with in a bunch of different industries. Scott Moran is actually one of those people. We've been circling around each other actually in the digital marketing community for years, and we actually met up and found we go to the same church.
and live 2 minutes to like 3
I live
miles
2 minutes
away or
away.
whatever. It's like,
I was like, oh my gosh, Sam Cart. I know what that is. That's fantastic.
I
Well,
know that
welcome to
guy.
the show.
Yeah, man, excited to be here. I like podcast Mark. You know what I mean? Everybody's got their own personas, and we got everybody. We'll put on the podcast voice and talk like this.
Oh
lot,
yeah,
right?
yeah. You gotta be like
NPR
here
style
we
for us at this
go.
point.
You know,
Yeah,
it's funny
yeah.
that kind of developed over time too, because I think once you start doing like the commercial readings and you start using the
Oh,
teleprompter,
it's so
it's
natural
easy.
to suck yourself into that. And it's funny too. Do you know the name Todd Herman?
No.
Anyway, good buddy of ours. Todd is a great guy. He wrote a great book, which I'll just happen to just shout out. It's called The Alter Ego, right? And so his whole
Oh.
thing is, a lot of times high performers, he does a lot of stuff with like Olympians and Fortune 500 CEOs and stuff like that. And he's talking about how important it is to adopt alter egos in different modes, in different so I have like you have dad Mark, I have dad Scott, I have business Scott, I have camera Scott. It's like, and you have these things and they're very real. And his whole thing is like, it's not disingenuous. It's actually important for the performance of each part of your life that you have these things. Anyway, it's a great book. Go read it. But it would support the
Definitely.
idea that all of us should adopt. We have podcast version of ourselves, and then we have, anyway, so yeah.
Well, what's funny is I kind of went through, because I was talking about a big transformation a year and a half ago. But I thought about that. I'm like, is it just disingenuous to be like, okay, well, I'm like this way, and I'm like that way.
Totally.
But
Yep.
really, if you use it as a way to connecting, as connecting with people, or even preparing yourself in order to deliver the highest quality, whatever, then it's a good thing. And it's not lying. It's just adapting to the recipient.
I totally. It's funny. Todd, again, the book is just a great book. I'm just happy to recommend it. But even talks so much about saying like that you should have what's your Superman cape, right? You know what I mean? Like
oh, yeah,
all of a sudden Superman has a cape on, he's a different person. You know what I mean? He's like, what are those things? And he would physically say like, Todd has his glasses, and he's like, when I put on my glasses, I'm like business Todd, and like that's what I do. And it's a fascinating thing. And he would say, don't shy away from it, lean into it. Like you will be a better X in all of your different lives and all of your different whatever, because you sort of adopt these different sides of the same coin, or these different sides of the same dice, so to speak. You know what I mean? That we've got these different parts of our lives, and we should lean into them. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and actually I used to think that was, hiding the real stuff, and
Right,
you're really
yeah.
not. You're really being sensitive to the environment and what you're
Totally.
actually doing at the moment. So I like that concept. And
That's
honestly,
awesome.
I thought,
Great read.
well, sometimes you have people who are like blunt, but they're also super mean. And you're like,
Right.
well, I just tell it like it is. And I'm like, who else does that? 3-year-olds. They
Yeah.
tell it like it is all the time. It doesn't mean they have
Small
any
children, and
development.
we try to work it out of them slowly but surely. Yeah. I was like, yeah,
Yes.
that's great.
Yeah, we say, and this is appropriate,
Yeah.
and it's it's not tweaking their personality. It's basically just preparing them to interact with people, and
Yeah.
and honestly, I think that's such a cop out when people do that. Like, well, that's just who I am, and you could take
Radical
it, and you
candor.
can
And
leave
they
it.
use these function, like high fancy kind of words. What's funny is now I can appreciate having Sam Cart's, what are we, 140 people and things like
Oh wow.
that. You know what I mean? And I can genuinely say, like, I've worked with a lot of different people in our leadership team over the years, and it's just, I just don't get along with those people. And that's fine. You know what I mean? Like we are honest and truthful. Transparency is one of our kind of core values. But yeah, it's like, I think people can hide behind these radical candor, right? Or I'm just that honest. I'm just that blunt. And I think it's okay to say, you know what, that doesn't always work. You know what I mean? It's not functional. It's not effective. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and then who are you really serving at that point? You're really just serving yourself. Like, here's how I talk.
Yeah.
I'm going to adapt to no one because this is me. And it's like,
Sure, right. Yeah. Have fun
so you
running
never
a solo
consider
business
anybody
by
else.
yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what ends up happening. And then even then they're like, why is it still not working? And it's like,
Right.
well, you
Sure,
hate
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. You should hang out. I know a lot of people in like the hills of Montana you would love to hang out with them. Yep. Yep. Or
Yeah,
not. You guys wouldn't like
and
it
they're
at all.
still
But,
mad, and
yeah,
I
right.
think,
Yeah.
and really what it is they're frustrated with themselves, and they're projecting their own,
Yeah.
perceptions on everybody, and they're doing all the bad psychological stuff that you don't even realize is happening until you accept that, I am
That's
being
it.
kind of
That's what's
mature.
driving this. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. 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 There's attractive people to be around. There's unattractive people to be around. You know what I mean? And it's a lot of times it comes back to that. I think you hit it on the head, right? Is the, how does that person, how does that person relate to others? I think tells you a lot about how they talk to themselves in private. You know what I mean? And how do they,
Oh
when they're
yeah.
alone, what's the self-talk, right? That was a big thing. I say my brother and my co-founder is my brother, is, you know, that if anybody listening. Anyway, our dad was always just so big on that. We had so many books about self-talk and so many, like, I can appreciate it now
Ah.
more, certainly doing what we've done professionally too. But I remember like we'd be like driving to baseball games when I'm like 7, you know, and my dad has like Jay Abraham cassette tapes that we're like listening to about like leadership and about self-talk and these kind of things. Like anybody who doesn't know, Jay Abraham would be like the Tony Robbins of our dad's
Oh
generation,
yeah.
right? Would be the kind of it. But anyway, yeah, that was, yeah, it's just, it stuff gets more and more true. The older you get, the easier it is to spot, you know what I mean? Where you just,
Oh,
you
it
can see those
is.
people coming from a mile away.
Well, it's almost like I love the childhood story because you start to remember those things and you're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
thing that I now believe at 40, I thought
Totally.
was total BS when I was 15. And you're like,
Exactly right. Yeah. No,
I
it's
was
funny
so
too, is,
wrong.
and now as a dad, I can see that programming and like the importance of what am I putting into my kids' brains, even
Mm.
though my daughter is 5, like she has room for like
Oh,
Sesame Street and Bluey in her brain and nothing else. But you know, it's the same kinds of things. I'm so grateful that I had parents that understood that concept, you know what I mean? And really, you are what you listen to, you are who you read, you are who you're around, you know, and those kind of concepts
oh
are,
yeah.
I think they're only more true the older I get.
Oh no, it's 100% that way. And it's
Yeah.
you feel kind of silly because you're like, well, I really should have been doing this for the last 25 years at least,
Right.
but
Yeah. Right.
better late than never.
It still is. Yeah. What's the
And now
best
you
time
get
to
to
plant a
go
tree, right? Yeah.
now you get to go annoy everybody else with the same lesson that they're going to blow off for 20 years.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Exactly
oh,
right.
I hope they
Yeah.
don't. And even when you tell them, you're like, okay, I'm going to say something. And
Right.
2 years ago, I would have never said this, but it is all in your head. It's all in
Exactly
your
right.
head. Like
Yep.
every
Yeah.
bad situation you could twist into, or not twist, but realize that's another opportunity versus another failure or problem or, bad
Amen.
situation.
Yep.
And
Amen.
it's well, and us, we both go to the Ridge in Austin, and
Yep.
you hear that story every single time. And now I love
Oh,
church.
of course.
Growing up, I never did.
Sure. Yeah. Getting dragged like everybody else. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you're like,
Ah,
oh, wait a minute.
it's
I
like
think there's some good
so
stuff going on here.
hard.
Yeah. I laugh. One of our only hiring policies that we have here, right, is we've got processes that we follow and stuff like that. But one of our only real rules that we have about our who we'll talk to, right, is we have a no assholes policy. And it is
Yeah.
written, it is codified, it is written down, it's this whole thing. And it is funny. We've had a bunch of people who like, yeah, we've got somebody who's really talented. They're going to get to the end of the line and kind of stuff like that. But you know what? This person's just kind of an asshole. And it's like every time we use that as a North Star, that means more than a really talented
Yeah.
engineer or somebody with a great resume or some, whatever. And every time we've been right, you know what I mean? And it's anyway, it comes back to the same thing, right? I think we're finding different ways to describe the same idea, but yeah, it's
Well,
the
no, I love how you
paid off.
apply it to the business though, because it's
Yeah.
100% true. And it doesn't matter
Yep.
how perfect the person is and how many awesome things they've
Exactly.
done and how they have a total
Yep.
plan for your business, because what will happen is if you ignore that rule and and it doesn't take very many of them, you could just have one asshole in your business and that could just take down a whole department. It could,
Whole departments, whole teams,
whole
100%.
teams.
Absolutely. And it has. And we had one of the, I'll share this story. It's pretty funny. We had an engineer, real rename nameless, but we had somebody who came in and we kind of, I remember during the hiring process, somebody sort of raised a little bit of a red flag. I'm like, I think this person's like kind of an asshole. Like, I just like, I gotta,
Just had a hint.
whatever. But we ignored it. Incredibly talented, came from a great spot, whatever like that, brought him in. And after day one, it was so abundantly clear that this person's team hated this person. Like, it was just like, whatever, that person was let go the morning of day 2 was that. It was like, you know what?
Wow.
Listen, we learned our lesson. Here's some severance. Get back on the job market. Keep
Please
taking
go
more
away.
interviews. It was like exactly what happened. And they were right. And they were exactly right. And they didn't suffer at all. They did better. Yeah. It's like the bad apple policy is very, very real, especially when you're leading a team, especially when you're, and it applies with everything, right? It's in your personal life, in your family and friend groups and this kind of stuff. And I think sticking to those guns, I think serves us really, really well and has continued to serve us really well. Yeah.
Well, not just that, but you taught that person a lesson too. It's maybe they don't
Yeah,
know
we'll
how
see. Yeah.
unpleasant and how well and how it's affecting their life because they probably have,
Sure.
well,
Yeah.
especially with IT and engineers, and my dad's a computer engineer, so
Right.
I
Yeah.
get
There's
it.
certainly certain types, you know what I mean, that can go on in there, right? Which is a very delicate situation to kind of manage sometimes. But no, that's yeah, no, you're exactly right. I think it's the more we stick to those kinds of things and you ignore, I don't know, a lot of times what's the opposite? And like I hear this a lot with a lot of our customers, stuff like that, where it's I fire bad clients. You know what I mean? You've got to be willing to say, you've got to be willing to call a spade, identify who those are in your life, whether that's personal or relational or clients or employee, whatever. And you've got to be willing to just take it out. You know what I mean? You've got to be ready to
Mhm.
just hack out stuff you don't like and be ruthless about that because yeah, I mean, listen,
Well,
everyone
you're
everyone
getting paid
performs
for it.
better when they're happier without those influences. Yeah.
Well, not just that, but I think what made the situation way simpler is that you have a set policy, you have a set
Yeah.
principle that's like,
Yeah.
no, we just don't violate this thing. And it doesn't matter, XYZ is different this time because it's
Right.
still that thing that is going to be a problem. You've identified it, you've found a
Yeah.
solution, and now you just have to do the solution. And
Totally.
for me, when I had my agency, it was the same way where you talk to somebody and you're like, oh my gosh, this person's going to be such a problem. Like, I really
Right.
hope they
Yeah.
don't agree to the
Right.
quote.
Don't
And
sign. Don't pay me money. Don't make me
no,
do
baby, just
it.
please. I know how
Please
this is
don't do
gonna
it.
end. And but then well, money, and then you do it anyways, and you always
Yeah.
regret it because it's gonna cost you 10 times the amount of effort to serve
Totally.
that person. Plus, now you're angry, you're upset
Yeah.
at the end of the day,
What's
and
that
now
worth to you? To
everything.
just not
Oh,
be that way. Yeah.
yeah. Just
Totally.
one day of like coming home and not being pissed off, like, man,
Yep.
yeah, I paid $500,
Yeah.
$1,000.
Right. We fired a VIP customer one time, and it was somebody, for us, the VIP mark is someone who's making over 7 figures a year, right? Is
Mm.
our mark here at Samcart, right? And I remember I got on a call and I fired a VIP customer, and it was just they were just making everyone's lives so terrible and
Horrible.
so awful. And what do you think happened? The next day, right? I get an email back from them that's basically like, baby, come back. You know what I mean? They're just like, please don't do this. Like, I need Samcart. I need this whole thing. I'm like, I wish I could
We've
help you.
tried.
It's not worth it. And man, it's just like the team was happy. Everything's better. You know what I mean? The sun's out the next day and like you get more out of everybody. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Writing it down is a real thing though. You're right. Yeah. Codifying it, writing it down, calling it what it is. Yeah. Big thing.
Well, then it makes the decision easy because that's
Right.
really where I think a lot of people go wrong, where it's like you can have like I'm a good person, like I make good decisions, but if I
Sure.
have to
Right.
evaluate
Yeah.
every decision and bring in
Yeah.
all these factors for the pros and the cons, then one, I'm going to make that decision way, way slower than I could have.
Sure.
And
Right. Yeah.
two,
Yeah.
there's a good chance that you're going to screw it up again because you knew the
Yep.
answer at the beginning and now you're justifying the opposite. So I think
Yep.
it has a lot to say about the, kind of intuitive nature of being a leader too, because
Yeah.
you could, because the alternative to not having these principles set where you can manage your team and manage your company a certain way
Right.
is that you have a
Yep.
person who is so principled and so confident in those principles that they just make the right decision all the time.
I'd
And
love to
that's
have one of
like
those in my
a
team. That's for
unicorn.
sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. A unicorn is right. Yeah, exactly right. Like I
Yeah.
think of myself as someone who cares about principles. And obviously we all see ourselves that way, I think, right? But it's funny, you know what I mean? The moment something comes up and it's a big enough opportunity, everybody goes, well, man,
Well, we could do
maybe
it this
I
one
don't.
time.
Yeah, like it's fine. You know what I mean?
It'll be
And it's
different this time.
right, exactly. It'll be different. And it's fun. We've had a couple of those opportunities too, because, with the nature of what we do, just being e-commerce and, I mean, selling stuff on the internet. I mean, we've had people show up and it's like, yeah, I'm $40 million a year in sales or something like that. But it's like, borderline pornography or, it's like
Oh,
whatever, like stuff
yeah.
like that. Or they're out there like clearly like breaking state laws around like pot and stuff. It's like you find stuff like that and it is
It's tempting.
sticking to it and writing it down, having those things is super important. And another one is just even like in the personal life, I'm exceedingly thankful for the woman I married. It's an incredible woman of character and just, has been whatever. She's a wonderful mom. It's awesome. She was the one who came back, not even me, who was like, I lead a company and I whatever. Anyway, but came back and we applied this same thing to our family. And so, now that we have daughters that are, starting to have friends and starting to whatever, is basically come back and wrote like a mission statement and like a
Oh,
guideline for our family, and what is it that we do here? You know what I mean? Like, who are we, and what are we not? Almost more importantly, is drawing the line about what am I not, right? And just writing those things out and having them. And yeah, like, sure, my daughter's 5. Does she really appreciate that? No, but
Oh,
she
but
will.
you
You know what I
do.
mean?
She
And
will,
it's
and she'll understand it.
yeah,
Well,
right.
because I think with a lot of dads, especially, like you don't get serious about like, okay, we better buckle down. And you see parents
Right.
doing it when they're
Sure.
like fifth, sixth, seventh, now they're going through puberty and you're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, now we're going to rein them in. And you're like, no,
Yeah.
you
Right.
lost,
Yeah.
you
You
know,
you missed the mile markers, man. You
you
know, it's
missed
like,
it.
yeah.
You missed it a
Yeah.
long time ago. And now
Right.
it's going to be harder, but it's still going to be definitely worth it to do it whenever you
Sure.
start it because, and
Yep.
that's the thing with a lot of parents these days. And, I'm not going to name anybody, of course, but you see people where you're kind of like, man, if you had just buckled down just a little bit sooner or a little
Sure.
bit,
Right.
harder than you did and didn't, let your kid who broke the rule, you set the rule, they broke it
Totally.
and then you said, well, yeah, but they have a game today. So
Right.
we
Yeah.
still have to go
Exactly
to the
right.
game.
Yep.
I can't make them not do, then they're not showing up to the team. But this goes back to that
Yep.
principle where it's like, hey, if you
Yeah.
just had the principle, like, hey, we said if you do this, this is going to happen. And we always do that. We always do
Exactly.
what we say we're going to do. Then
Yep.
there's no question from the kid where it's like, oh, well, I could sweet talk mom and dad into
Yeah.
still letting me
Right.
go.
Sure.
And
Right. Yep. Nope.
and
Yeah.
honestly, we
That's the
have very
rule.
few barriers, and you
Right.
said you have
Yep.
a daughter.
We do. Yeah. 2. Yeah. 5 and 1.
Oh,
Yeah.
two daughters.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Now for me, I was like,
Yep.
I got two sons, and so
Yep.
because I know me personally, like I get walked all over, by
Totally.
women in general, but especially my wife, and it would definitely happen with my daughter, and
Oh
so I'm
man,
kind
it's
of like,
hard. It's hard not to.
oh,
Even at 5, I'm like, you're
you're
wonderful.
so
You have whatever
cute.
you want. All the presents.
You're
Yes.
perfect. But in the long run, that does not serve them, because
Yeah,
the
exactly.
world is
That
not.
is brilliant. That's it. Yep,
Oh,
100%. Doesn't
well,
serve them.
it's
You're
not the
exactly
bubble.
right. Yep, you're
It's
exactly
it's
right.
just preparing them for a world that doesn't exist, which is a world that will always say it's okay and you can
Yep.
still do it anyway and you'll still be fine and you'll still be whatever. It's like now,
Yeah.
these kids will get out in the world and they'll get their butts kicked and they'll find out that
Yeah.
their parents were lying the whole time
Yep.
about
For
how
sure.
things work, or they
Yep.
just won't do
That's
anything. Imagine a world where your brand transcends visibility, embedding itself into the consciousness of your customers. Welcome to the AI Branding Bootcamp, where this vision becomes reality. Dive into AI-powered research, strategy, and execution to create a brand that's not just recognized, but felt. From crafting your brand's avatar to mastering AI-generated content, emerge with a brand that resonates deeply. Ready to transform your brand into an unforgettable experience? Join us at the AI Branding Bootcamp. The future of branding begins now.
yeah. Or they're just coasting because home is safe and that's it. You know what I mean? I'm 34, right? So I have a number of friends that I don't want to say like think people react to life differently. You know what I mean? Mark, I have 2 friends in the last 12 months moved back in with their parents, and their parents are like
Wow.
retired. You know what I mean? And that kind of stuff. And it's just one of those things where like they are perfectly capable. They've got jobs, they've got whatever, but that life out there is scary. You know what I mean? And it's like, to me, it's another thing. I just, whatever. I'll talk about my parents more than on any podcast where I talked about my life. But you know what I mean? Like, I just appreciate so much. My parents always said is like, my job is not to protect you. My job is to prepare you. Right.
Yes.
And they were saying that's the job was you're going to go out there in the world and you're going to be a high functioning human being adult who's going to impact people, and you're going to impact people at a company. You're going to impact relations and friends and that kind of stuff. And that's what the job is. The job isn't to shelter and prepare. And that's as true as business and life as anything, you know what I mean? And yeah, that's playing it out in real time with your own kids, a little tougher, honestly,
so
but I appreciate it more than I ever did. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it is. And honestly, you loving them is you preparing them because you coddling and you saying it's okay and oh no, you are doing great when they get an F on a test and that was the teacher's fault. And actually, what's funny is when we were younger, you'd see the parents do that. And for whatever reason, like as I got older, I'm like, well, I think parents have figured it out. Like you just can't do you can't side with the kid against the teacher. That doesn't
who would
make
do that? Right.
any sense at all.
Yeah.
But you see it, I've actually seen a growth in it over the
Yeah.
years, where I kind of thought it was like, oh, well, we got this nailed. Like, you obviously trust the people you put in charge of your child for the
Apparently
day.
not. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, well, not if
Apparently not.
you, well, not if well, say you're kind of a selfish parent, and
Sure. Right. Yeah.
my child is a status symbol essentially, or an extension of
Sure.
me. And I
Yep.
don't care about what the long-term effect is, because right now I need them to be like this. And,
Yep.
and we've actually had a lot of discussions about like cell phone use, where,
Yeah.
for your kids, it's probably not a huge deal,
Not
but
quite there. Yeah. 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 But
but
we are
yeah.
rapidly approaching. She's gonna start asking. I guarantee it. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, we
Yeah.
told my son, we're like, hey, if you don't even bother us about getting a cell phone, then we'll buy you a car at 16.
Done.
And
Like it, that's it. But you gotta
that's
shut up about the phone.
gotta shut up. And
That's great.
honestly, it's good for him, because he actually, now he's like only one of his friends that hasn't oh, no, and not his friends, but in some of the older classes uh don't have a cell phone. And that's
Right.
been super, unique to our situation. And the kids that have had cell phones, or have maybe been doing that for a long time, you could see it. And now there's studies coming out that say that if a kid uses a cell phone at all before a certain age, I think it's like 8 or
Right.
9, then it leads to
Right.
immediate decreases in cognitive development. And it's kind of like,
That's crazy. I mean, it's the same thing you see with like you hear all these did you ever read what was that Netflix one? Oh, I mean, it'll come to me after I forget. Anyway, but it was the Netflix came out and published that one documentary. It was basically just talking about the effects of social media on the human brain, right?
oh
And it
yeah,
was, and they had quotes from like Zuckerberg and Musk and whatever, and like all these people are like, no, my kids aren't touching social media. You know what I mean? Like, you
yeah, are
wonder,
you
like, the
crazy?
guys that made it don't want your kids to, like, won't let their kids touch it. Like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. And I think the I don't know, it's a very fine line, right, between being like the controlling parent, the controlling leader, the control, whatever it is in your context, somebody's listening to this, you know what I mean? I think the rules are so similar, you know what I mean? With just like your job is to curate, you know what I mean? Like inputs, right? And keep people on the right track, right? While like not sheltering them from the truth. You know what I mean? Like it is protection, but it's not like, you know what I mean? It's not insular, but it's guided. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that, and finding the balance between being someone who is, I'm helping someone grow, right? But also, like, we've had some of the worst manager horror stories we've had at Samcar. You know what I mean? Almost always come back to people who are my team. I'm so protective of my team that everybody else is wrong, right? And it's like, if you don't balance honesty and truth about reality with protective instincts and, like, you know what I mean? Because they just view this like my team or die and mentality is a
yeah,
virtue to them, right? And they're not wrong. Like, I want you to feel that way, and I want your team to know that you're going to go to bat for them. But like, if you can also be honest and truthful about underperformers, about like work that
yes.
isn't important,
Oh,
or whatever, like, you just, that's that imbalance that gets out of whack and usually ends up, at least here at this organization, it ends up with you looking for other work. That's what
oh
it's
yeah.
most of the
Well,
value.
well, the thing is that we all feel bad about that. Like, we hired somebody, it didn't work out, we had to let them go.
Yeah.
But really, if you think about it, it's just like your kids. It's like, yeah, you could not do that, and you could pretend that
Mm,
everything's okay, and you could,
yep.
I love how you said truth, because you could skew the truth where it's like they
Yeah.
belong here, but they really don't, and they shouldn't be here, and it's not helping them grow either.
Yep.
Then who are you actually serving? Or are you just being kind of a
Yeah.
coward about a decision that you've already made, and now you're just
Totally.
kicking the can?
Totally.
It's
And to me, that's like, that's leadership. You know what I mean? Like, that's the role that not everyone is suited for. You know what I mean? And some people have to learn that one tough too. We've had people who think they're suited for leadership, but they're not, because they can't do that. And that's not fun. That doesn't endear, like, we'll go back to the kid example. You know what I mean? When I tell my daughter, like, no, you can't watch 8 hours of TV a day, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not her friend in that moment, you know what I mean? And like, I want her to love me and just like dad, and it's all great, you know what I mean? But when she storms off and does this, am I a worse parent, or am I just being a better leader and serving her? You know what I mean? Like, and if
yep, you're
I'm
doing the
willing
hard
to
thing.
take on the angst of that moment, you know what I mean? And shoulder that responsibility, you know what I mean? Then that's leadership. And if you're someone who doesn't like that, my recommendation is get yourself out of leadership. You don't need to be there,
Yeah,
right? But that is, I mean, might be the single most critical skill of leadership, really, in any capacity.
it is making that
Yeah.
tough decision. And it's kind
Yeah.
of funny, because when we were growing up, it's like, be a leader, not a follower. And the
Right.
more I've
Yeah.
grown up,
Yeah.
the more I'm like,
Sheesh.
man, if you can't be a follower, you should not be a leader at all,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
And there's
That's
nothing wrong with
wise.
being a
Yeah.
follower, right? I mean, it's like, oh, a
For
follower,
sure. Yeah.
you take
Yeah.
instructions like a jerk. And it's like, no, no, we're a
Sure.
team trying to achieve something. And if somebody's
Yeah.
more capable than me and is better at managing projects or people or
Yeah.
situations better than me, then why wouldn't I want that person in charge? You know,
Totally.
it's like
Totally.
the deserted island scenario where it's like, who's the leader? It's like, who here has been in a situation like this before?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you're the leader. Go. Like,
Yep.
I'm
Right.
so happy it's not me.
Yeah, totally. No, it's funny. So when we obviously my brother and I started our company and whatever the whole thing. Brian's not the CEO and neither am I. I have a boss. You know what I mean? Like he has we are there was basically a guy who's been with us for a long time. He was essentially functioning as like authority CEO. You know what I mean? Brian had the title authority, he had the real authority, right? This guy's name is Justin. And man, it was like the biggest weight off Brian's shoulders to not be CEO anymore, right? When we made Justin
Yeah.
officially, you are it. And so, yeah, it comes with some of that stuff. But yeah, man, listen, like I've always, I don't know, the whole team winning aspect above me winning aspect has always been just sort of a part of my personality. Like I grew up, we played baseball, it was me and Brian was sort of our thing. And like I just always wanted the team to win. I didn't care about where you're hitting the order or where, whatever. And it's like ultimately, if you want to build a successful team, and it's funny too, we're talking about, I genuinely believe this is as true as about parenting or anything is business or whatever. That you've got to be able to mix. Good leadership has some of that in it. You know what I mean? You cannot, I've never in my life encountered a good leader, someone I really respected, that needed to take all the credit for stuff. Right.
Oh,
And in fact, I think good leaders are mostly the opposite, are the people who are willing to say, hey, team did this, right? And credit to, A over here because they did this, and credit to B over here did this. And it's, what good leadership book starts with, I killed it and I'm in the spotlight. I mean, there's just so few of the
look
really
at
truly
me.
good leaders out there. Exactly. Are that type person. And I don't think anybody would ever say like, oh yeah, that's me. I want the spotlight all the time. But I think it's really important to do the audit, you know what I mean? And try to say like, okay,
Oh
cool. Like,
yeah.
let's try to look at myself accurately, or let's get people I trust to give some honest feedback. You know what I mean? And is it more about me? Is it more about others? You know what I mean? It's like and making sure that you're on the right side of the equation, because most of those leaders are not people who foster loyalty. They're not people who keep good people for very long. You know what I mean? And yeah, again, it's leadership.
Oh
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always say that, the best leaders usually are the reluctant ones, right? It's the person who's
Yeah.
like, you know what? This is a responsibility because I know I'm the best at this and I know
Yep.
what we need to get done. Or maybe I just have the vision that nobody can see. And so I'll take on the role of leader, even though it sucks,
Right.
and guide everybody through it versus like, oh, if you're not a leader, you're a loser. And it's like,
Yeah. Right.
oh,
Yeah.
why did we ever say that? Why did
Right.
anybody ever propose that, it's not all of us together figuring out a situation? And I think it
Yeah.
was really just that whole like, YOLO, all about me generation, where it's just like, no, you just
Totally.
got to get
Yep.
yours. If you're not
Totally.
killing it and if you're not making everybody do what you want to do, then you're being a
Yeah.
wuss. Like you're not
I think it's the
taking
Gary
control.
Vaynerchuk syndrome, which is funny too, because like we have a bunch of people here at Samcard who are like young Austinites, you know what I mean? They're like they don't even know who Gary Vaynerchuk is anymore. They like look at me like I'm a dinosaur because I know who Gary V is. But like, I think Gary V, like with good intentions, I certainly appreciate Gary for a lot of what he
Yeah.
talks about. But I think a lot of that is like the get yours, solo business owner, or you're a loser, like, whatever. Like you got to own something, you got to do that kind of stuff like that. When I think the pressure comes off when you realize like that's okay. Not everyone has to,
Yeah.
like, not
You
everyone
don't have
should
to.
do that, let alone should aspire to something like that. Like
Has
that
to.
doesn't, yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? I'll tell you, my lifestyle was a lot better before we started the whole team thing and it was just me and Brian or whatever that. I'm a lot more fulfilled and I love what we're doing. It's awesome. It's so fun. But I mean, yeah, there's the level of responsibility is
Oh,
heavy, you know what I mean? And weighs
it's
and it's
heavy.
real. And yeah, yeah.
Well, that's the kind of thing I talk about, people who are, successful and have lots of money and everybody's
Mm,
told like, oh no, that's the goal in life. I'm like, you know what? It's a different set of problems. Like now you got to manage
totally.
this thing that you've built and now
Yep.
you have a farther way to fall if you fail. And so it's kind of
Yeah.
like, who has it better? The lowly intern who has zero responsibilities.
Flicks off at 5 and we're all
Click
set and that's
and
it. You know what I
done.
mean? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
I got lunch, boss. See you later.
Yeah.
You're like,
Right.
oh man, I'm
Yep.
super jealous of you right now.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds
And no, we
incredible.
had a board meeting last week where we're sitting across the table from 5 or 6 guys that wrote a bunch of huge checks and, they were sitting here snapping fingers and talking. And it's like, there's a level of that is great. I'm so
Yeah.
proud of what we've been able to accomplish here as a team and how many people we serve every day. There's all this stuff that's awesome. But man, no one talks about the high pressure stuff of the leadership role. You know what I mean? That's like,
Oh man, the
and
painful
yeah.
stuff,
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah,
it's
for sure.
well,
Yep.
and honestly, we're all facing it right now where
Mhm.
there's massive layoffs happening in all companies. There's
Yeah. Talk about the
uncertainty,
pains
which
of
is,
leadership. You know what I mean? Yeah. You got to
oh,
sit there and say, sorry. You know what I mean? And we've done the same and we've done it and it's real. Yeah. That part
yeah,
stinks, man. That's not fun.
not
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
fun. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so I just like to, inform people like it's okay to have a job and it's okay to,
Yeah.
you know, hang
I
out,
think I think
learn the role.
everybody and even if we're talking to people who are leaders and for people listening or I mean if that is you know what I mean like whether that's you or not whether you're someone who says like cool I'm just sitting in a job right now and that's great or you are that leader like equally important in both sides is that I think everybody needs to make time to chase what they really care about in their lives. You know what I mean? And like
Or realize what you care about.
exactly. And take time to think about I ask that question a lot of our younger folks who work here,
Mm.
folks who are in their 20s and whatever. I was like, "Hey, what do you do?" You know what I mean? Like what else? And they're like, "What do you mean I work here?" And they're like, "No, like what do you do? Like who are you? Like
What's
how do
the
you
point?
spend your
Yeah.
time? How do you whatever?" And I always think that people who say I work and I eat and I go to sleep, you know what I mean, are the people who are least productive. They are the most likely to churn and head out and go somewhere else. You know what I mean? And it's like one of these things we always try to promote as much as we can, try to promote as much balance as we can, right? And
Mm.
whether you're in a role where you're one part of a bigger machine or you are in leadership, I think it's more important for leaders for sure. But you got to identify those things, like who are you and what makes you you, and carve out time for those things. You know what I mean? Like for me, it's one of those things. For I like baseball and sports was always like a massive outlet for me. You know what I mean? And so like as dumb as it is, I still have to like find time and find a slow pitch softball league and like just go feel dirt under me and like field a ground ball. Like something about that, like 1 hour a week of doing that is like, and you just like, you're
Best.
so much more who you are and it's just balance. I don't know. I think you go back to the Gary Vaynerchuk thing. That example I kind of bring up a lot because he was so like anti-balance. You know what I mean? It was like give as much time and as many hours you possibly can and chase your dream because no one's gonna do it for you and screw the haters and it's like all stuff. And I'm like, man, that is not balance. You know what I mean? I think when I am out of balance, I am a worse dad. I am a worse employee. I'm a worse founder. Like, you know what I mean? And finding balance, I think, is like the most critical possible thing you could do. Not because it's good mental health routine, but I think it's also just performance based. You know what I mean? If you
Oh, it's
want to
essential.
achieve,
It's profitable.
yeah, you've got to find what those are. You've got to carve out time and because you're gonna look up and you're gonna have 2 boys, you're gonna have 2 girls and a business to run and all this stuff. And I think that's why you get guys that just like hit the middle of their life and they don't know who they are. And it's like now they're
Oh, so
buying
sad.
cars thinking that's going to tell them, or they're, divorcing wives and, because they're tossing their life out the drain because I just need something different. It's like you've got to find out who you are. You've got to find that balance and you've got to make time because no one else will do it for you.
Love that, man. That's a huge sentiment right there. Because I think if you could get to that point where you could say, hey, here's why I'm doing it, here's my purpose, and I'm gonna move forward. And no matter what else I do and what goes right or wrong, like that's still gonna be my purpose, then
Yeah.
you could weather all of the storms and it's not a big
Yeah.
deal anymore.
Yep.
And now it's
Yep.
huge.
I mean,
Well,
how many people do you think that have like a really good grasp on like they've got at least one hobby that they spend time with every week that they know like they love? I don't know that many, honestly. I think most people are pretty content to I have my kids and we watch TV at night and I work. You know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of it.
oh
And it's
yeah.
I would say I learned this lesson the hard way, right? Is a at different points in our short career of doing what we do. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I've just been like completely unhappy and completely out of whack and completely whatever. And then no, it's when you go back and you rediscover these are the things that make me who I am. I love playing guitar. I love playing baseball or softball, whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, and find those kind of things is when you're like, oh wow, all right, you've got that it's always that thing, right? You either feel the wind in your sails or you feel like you're standing still. And when you're feeling the wind in your sails, you're unstoppable. And when you're standing still, you're just clawing it. How do I get it to keep going again? You know what I mean? And to me, that's always been my thing, is back to, these are what I know I love. Take time, figure out what it is, write it down, and just remember. And that's it. Yeah.
Oh man, well, you're doing awesome at 34, man. I only had these realizations in the last like couple of years, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it would have been so convenient to realize this sooner. Because, well, I'll tell everybody what happens if you don't figure this stuff out is you just keep on burning and you keep on burning, and you use that as the justification for you not discovering anything about yourself, and then you eventually burn out. And that's when you get the guys who have the midlife crisis with the, buying the sports car and getting divorced. I think when I finally had that realization, like I literally was so grateful that I hadn't screwed everything up, because that's
right.
exactly
I
what
figured
happened.
this out
You're
before
grenaded.
all that. Yeah, exactly. Yep. And then I think it's also having the humility to understand that that comes and goes, and you got to constantly, it's not like no one just has it. And they're like, I figured it out, and this is it for the rest of my life. It's so like, happy. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's it. I can't believe I'll never have to learn that lesson again. No, it's the continual reminder. And that's why you write things down. I'm such a big proponent. My dad, again, I'm talking about my parents more than whatever. Our dad was a big journal guy. He always journaled, right? And so every morning I'd wake up and I'd come downstairs, and no matter how early I got up, he was up already. He was journaling, and that was his mental help processing, whatever kind of stuff like that. And so I didn't pick it up quite as hard as he did, but writing things down, you know what I mean? And that's to me, at least for me personally, I can't speak for everybody, but that's how when the winds shift and the winds start blowing a different way, you don't get blown with it, because you remember and you've got a track record of, I was unhappy in 2016 because of this, you know what I mean? And I remembered, drill down, get back to who you are, focus on these things, you know what I mean? And then again, in 2018, it happened again. And this is how I got out of it, whatever, that type of stuff is super, super important. So especially for people in leadership roles or parents or whatever, I'm a big proponent of that.
Man, well, like I said, I think you have an excellent mindset, and you realize it, really early, before all the screw ups. So kudos to you.
Yeah, credit to my parents, man. Yeah, that's who they were. That really is who they were. I'm more thankful for it every day. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, keep it up. I think you got an awesome track going. And next time we'll talk some more business. But I think this has been fantastic.
This is great. No, that was not at all what was on the show notes. I love it, man. This is more passionate about this stuff than anything else. But no, this was great, man.
Well, it's really the tips that really help people, because we could talk about like, hey, here's how to sell more e-commerce, but it's like, man, if you don't have that base of the
write some better subject lines, you know what I mean?
Or send an email or two. But no, that's huge. I think you're going to help a lot of people just by having and continuing that mindset, and mentoring your employees like that too. So it looks like you're kicking butt. So
appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Good to have you back on soon, because we'll have a lot more to talk about. But in the meantime, where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, man. samcart.com. Go check us out. So e-commerce platform. You can follow me. I'm on Twitter. I'm at Scotty Moran 11 or something like that. Whatever. You can go find me. I'm not terribly active on a lot of those places, but you can definitely go follow, go hit it up. Anybody's got questions, I'm Scott at samcart.com. You guys email me questions. You want to talk about something, leadership or whatever, I'm more than happy to. It's a big passion.
Excellent. Well, appreciate your time. Again, love your mindset. You got an amazing business. Sounds like you got a growing, happy family, and I wish you all the luck.
Blessed for it. Absolutely. Yeah. We'll be back soon, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to Podcast Mark. We'll be back very soon, producing 1 million episodes this week alone. So tune back in and listen to more leaders and visionaries and other crazy people I have on the